Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to show you how I made my LED ball, this time with color Capiz shells. And as an Amazon affiliate marketer, I make commission on qualifying purchases, but I am going to show you some of the stuff that I use so that you can purchase it if you have problems getting it yourself. These are the colored Capiz shells, and you can get them at a variety of places. I try to get the biggest ones I can. Now, these are around 2.5 inch diameter. They are a little bit stronger than the normal Capiz shells that I use. So I haven't been able to use my scissors to cut them. So it's a little bit more challenging to cut these. So I'm using an X-Acto knife saw that you can see right here. And on a piece of paper, I drew the angles that I want to use for my project. So I have something as a guide to saw against. So I have the same type of angles in this project. Basically, I'm trying to get, obviously, the most out of one shell that I can. So I'm sawing here and sawing there and making variety of sizes, but I'm starting off with this particular size. And then I'm using the scrap to make smaller triangles. Now, if there's little fuzzy bits left after you've cut the piece of shell, then I'm using my scissors to cut off the fuzzy little bitsies that didn't saw off. Now, it could be that they're using some kind of lacquer paint to dye these shells. I haven't figured that out yet. I am trying to dye my own shells. There's many different ways they talk about it online, but I have tried the food coloring and some dyeing methods, and nothing has really worked to my satisfaction yet. But if I do figure out how I can dye them, then I'll let you know, because I'd really like to be able to have different shades of different colors when I want colors, instead of only the ones that I can purchase. I do like using shells. Here I am taking the dust off of them before I foil them. I do like using shells because they're translucent. The light goes through them. They're lightweight. You don't have to worry about really sharp edges like you do with glass. So you don't have to do the grinding that you would have to with glass. It's just kind of a fun alternative to use this for stained glass work. I guess it's stained shell work, or I guess it's not even stained, but it's soldered and foiled Capiz shells, I can call it. Now I'm using a foil that is 3 millimeters wide, and I'm using that size for to foil the edges. This is a nice size. It doesn't make the border too thick. You know, I don't really want to use the full normal 7/32 inch width because that's really wide. And this is a nice, it's even. I don't have to go and cut it like I do sometimes. This is copper colored, so doesn't have the nice black background for it. But for these, it's fine because they're not completely transparent pieces of shell, so it's not like we're going to see the back of the copper tape when it's done. So that's a nice thing to consider. You know, you don't want to have a well, unless you really want to, but I don't usually want to have a contrasting color if I'm going to see the color. I like to match the color with the color patina that I'm going to use. I am not going to patina this project, so it's going to end up being the silver color when I'm done. Whenever you foil, you also need to press down your foil, especially if you're only going to overlap your project by a minimal amount. As I said, I'm using pretty thin foil. Right there is a plastic probe that I bought on Amazon, and I use those often to squish down the edges. And if they're not lining up perfectly, you can kind of like nudge it over, or you could also use an X-Acto knife and actually trim your foil where they don't meet perfectly if you want to have the seams look really nice and smooth when you're done. So I'm going around every single one and making sure that they're pressed down nicely on both sides, making sure I didn't mess up and overlap really unevenly. And now I'm just kind of, so I made a pile of them, and then I'm putting them on my table that I'm working on, putting some gel flux in my little container. And what I decided was, since I'm going to not have a solid project when I'm done, I'm going to have like gaps between these pieces of shells, that I decided I'm going to pre-solder all my pieces before I attach them together. So and I'm wearing like these little silicone cots on my fingers, which do help with the temperature doesn't burn my fingers quite as quickly as if I touch these things without some kind of protection for my fingers. It's still not perfect, but it does help some. And as you see, I am turning these shells over, and I'm soldering both sides really quickly. You don't want to keep your solder iron on them too long. You don't want to heat up these little things too much, because the shell and whatever lacquer or whatever is on them to make the color, that might get damaged from all the extra heat. And plus, the adhesive in the tape itself will tend to come off if you heat it up too much, and it won't have that stickiness to it, and your piece of shell might fall off at that point. Okay, so I have my silicone ball that most people would use these probably to fill with resin, but what I did was I filled the inside of the ball with just normal stuffing that you'd use to stuff like pillows or dolls or something. And then I put a piece of 14 gauge copper wire and put it made a circle out of it, so it's really nice and perfectly round. And I put that around the top, so I have something to start on. So that's what I'm going to hang my ball when I'm done by this wire. And I'm also going to so I'm going to use that wire to put the chain on and stuff. And what I'm doing right now is I am soldering just willy-nilly here and there different pieces of my triangles. And I will be using the bigger ones first, basically, because I'm going to fill in between them with the smaller pieces. And, I just kind of guessed how many I wanted to have anyway. So it's just kind of a free-for-all. I have a darker green color, I have a light green color, and I have that yellow goldish color. The thing that I just moved is a thumbtack that I had covered with silicone, which is another project that I was working on, because I wanted my thumbtacks, I wanted to be able to pick them up without burning my fingers. So I just love silicone. So one of them, you can see on the right side there, I made a little mold that out of silicone, and then I made a little cast around a thumbtack. So I did that for one to see how that worked. The other ones were just globs of silicone that I had mixed. I did that mix of water and dishwashing detergent, that method, and made like a kind of a gooey mess of silicone and kind of molded it around the thumbtack. So that works nicely too. These thumbtacks I used are stainless steel, so they're not going to rust, because I was having problems with my thumbtacks rusting. So now I just love my thumbtacks because I can touch the top of them and hold them if I need to, and they're not going to burn my fingers, and they're also not going to rust. So that was pretty cool. And then because my silicone ball that I'm using is full of stuffing, the thumbtack will go into the silicone and then stick all the way through with the stuffing there. And then when I pull it out, when I pull these thumbtacks out, they are reusable. The silicone ball, the hole just kind of like closes back up kind of, and you haven't really damaged your silicone ball that you've been using. So you can reuse a silicone ball over and over again, and you can reuse the stuffing over and over again, which is really awesome. I put a piece of plastic bag at the top that you can see on the left-hand side there, and that was to cover the end of the stuffing because it was getting kind of gooey the first time. So this way I can reuse the stuffing all the time. That is a piece of cloth that I'm using to kind of balance my circle on. So that's one of the hardest things about doing something like this, especially something that's round, because it likes to roll off your table. So I have to keep on finding some way to hold the ball where I want it as I'm attaching all these triangles. And I didn't want to take off the thumbtacks too early because they were what holding the circle on. But now that I've removed the thumbtacks, it's a little bit easier to roll the ball around and put it where I want to. Now, because I've already added, I've already put solder all the way around these triangles, it's pretty easy to solder one to the other. You don't even have to flux them that much or that often because I didn't wash the triangles off after I put the original solder on them. So they still have a little bit of flux on them because I just kind of fluxed the mass of them before I did the sides. So now I'm just putting on the triangles wherever they fit. I'm trying to alternate colors, so I don't want to have two yellows together. Preferably, I'd like to keep on scattering the different colors and the different angles, so that they'll look kind of random. This actually ended up being the ball that most people like the best. When I show them all the different lighted LED balls that I made this year, this is the one that everyone goes, "Oh, I just love the green triangle one." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's cool. It did end up looking really neat when it was done. I hope you guys like it too." So what was really cool also is that I ended up using all the little triangles that I made. So I just like made a pile of them. I didn't know how many I needed. And as I said, I put in the bigger ones first and then went smaller and smaller and smaller until I ran out of triangles. And then I just kept on turning it. And as you're turning the ball around, it gets more and more secure, obviously, because I've, the only part without any really is that opening where I'm going to put the chain. I'm going to also fill in and help secure any really small gaps. I'm going to put solder in those areas to help hold it all together. So it's amazing how it looks pretty varied when I'm done, and I only use 3 different colors. And that's pretty neat. So you don't need to use, tons of different colors in your projects for them to look fun and varied. So as you can also see, I did use a lot of the scraps. When I cut my Capiz shells, there wasn't a lot of waste because I used all the different scraps to make the triangles. Sometimes I'm using, for those who haven't seen my other videos, sometimes I'm using scraps of solder from other projects or pieces that have fallen on my table. And sometimes I'm using brand new piece. It really doesn't matter. You never have to throw away any solder. So if you have extra globs of solder that fall on your table or workspace, just save it because there's always times when you will be able to use it. And actually, having a very small piece is sometimes very advantageous because then you're not sucking up lots of solder and having too much solder. You can just put just a little bit on your, find a very small blob on your table and just use it. And it's a very quick way to tack on a piece. And there I'm using a brand new piece. And I'm filling in that little gap between those two triangles. Because these pieces of shell were all pre-soldered, basically tinned all the way around, the solder goes to them really, really fast. It's just a much faster way of getting your solder to adhere to your pieces. Another good thing about already soldering both sides of these triangles is I don't have to worry about the inside after I take the stuffing out and the ball off. I don't have to worry about the inside not having that silver look because it's all soldered already. I may want to reinforce it here and there, but I don't have to worry about a color problem with the inside and the outside. Because obviously, since I'm not filling in every single space on this project, we will be able to see inside this sphere also. If your project is going to be solid, I guess you wouldn't have to worry about the visualness of the back of everything because you wouldn't be able to see it. But we will be able to on this. I think I did end up having to cut a couple triangles to fit way at the end because they weren't small enough. But I think only like two of them. So it was amazing how they did pretty much all get used and not have to adjust all but a couple. So filling in all these spaces as best as I can not only made it look good, it also helped reinforce each other. Because obviously, if the spaces are really big, your sphere, when you're all done, is not going to be as secure as if you have them all soldered to each other. So I have all my little pieces attached now, and now I'm just going around the whole thing and making sure everything soldered is as nice as possible. I'm also adding solder, as you can see, to that copper ring around the top because that solder, the solder is silver and the ring is copper colored. And also there was that little gap where the ring that I made met. So I had to put a glob of solder there too. That yellow thing in the upper right-hand corner is my exhaust fan, which I have adapted it to be vented directly out my window. So I just added a hose to the back end of it. So I'm not relying on the filter because it's just sucking right outside. Yeah, this is not the kind of stained glass soldering that has perfect, smooth, symmetrical seams. This is more free-flowing, artsy, more globby soldering. So if you like beautiful, smooth seams, this is not that kind of stained glass work. See, there are times like right there where I just added a lot of solder on purpose because that area wasn't really attached to each other because the triangles weren't touching. So when I have an area issue like that, I just add a lot of solder, and so that the solder itself is helping to support the um, the image, the art. If you let an area cool a little bit, and then you just kind of get off a fresh piece of solder and don't heat it up into what's already there very much, then it will tend to end up being a bridge. If you heat it up a real lot, it will kind of just like fall off your piece because it won't stay there. So now I'm pulling out the stuffing. As you see, I put a lot of stuffing in there. And then the silicone ball itself will just bend. It's collapsible, which is just awesome. Now you can see that I'm washing the inside. I've already washed the outside a little bit before I took it apart. And I'm just using Windex right now. And I'm just cleaning the inside and the outside to get rid of any residual flux there is or any other yuck that's on it, so it's as clean and shiny as possible. So this is it when it's done. It's really kind of fun. There's kind of a hollow glob of Capiz shells. And I have a string of little teeny weeny fairy lights that are electric, plug-in style, and I hung them up, and then I went down. I went in my archway of my house and then down and then into the ball itself. So this is the finished look. And it's really fun and unique. It's not all that time consuming. It's just a fun project, and I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.